Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Hayley Benedict. I'm a cyber analyst here at RANE. I'm joined with my fellow cyber analyst, Ali Plucinski, and today we're here to talk about Scattered Spider. So, this is a ransomware group that's been gaining a lot of attention the past few months. It's carried out some really high-profile campaigns. Something that's really interesting about the way that this ransomware group has been operating is that it's been going sector by sector. So first it started with the retail sector. So those really big M&S retail hacks, that was Scattered Spider. And then it started targeting insurance industry and the airline industry as well, based in the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Anglophone countries. They're just motivated by wanting to cause chaos, and they're kind of part of this nihilistic extremist movement. They're anarchists. They want to cause the downfall of society through these disruptive cyber attacks. Also, obviously, financially motivated because it's ransomware.
One of the aspects that you mentioned that's interesting about the group is, again, they're primarily, we believe, young teenagers or adolescents. And what they've really been successful at is, frankly, not super sophisticated technical cyber attacks, but just being very adept at social engineering. They consistently impersonate help desks from different companies. They're very good at targeting cybersecurity mechanisms that are intended to protect employees, like multi-factor authentication. They're one of the many groups that tries to exploit that feature through MFA fatigue attacks, where they just keep sending these reminders in an effort to gain access to the company. And they've been monumentally successful. I mean, some of the companies that this group has hit are among the most high-profile Western companies. We saw MGM and Caesars, the U.S. entertaining and gaming companies, in mid-2023. And then more recently, it's been, I believe in the UK, it was Harrods, Co-op, and one other. So, they're definitely, I think, it's tough sometimes because you just think, okay, well, they're just a bunch of young kids that are kind of messing around, but at the same time, they're causing like millions and millions of dollars in terms of revenue losses. Even more interestingly, I mean, in the last few days, we covered this in one of our recent pieces, was just around the fact that it looks like they're ganging up with other young, nihilistic, or however you want to describe these ideologically motivated youth, disaffected youth, along with two other prominent ransomware groups in the last few days, Shiny Hunters and Lapsus, which, again, even though they're not employing highly sophisticated tactics, those two groups have also taken down super high-profile companies, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Uber. So, yeah, it's really interesting. And Haley, I'm sure you can speak more to that, larger movement that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I want to talk about the com. They're all linked underneath the com, but I also want to talk about the social engineering aspects that they're using because that MGM hack, the MGM Caesars hack that happened in 2023, they literally just called the employee help desk and they were like, "Hey, I'm an employee and I can't get in my account." And they just let them in, and I'm sure that it was a little bit more pushy than that and a little bit more, sneaky. But it's just kind of crazy to think about that that's really how they're operating and what they're doing. And it's causing so much damage. Like Caesars was down, or maybe it was MGM, one of them was down for like over a week, a couple weeks.
So Caesars paid, MGM decided not to, and MGM ended up reporting more than $100 million in losses because they decided not to pay the ransom.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and it's just interesting now that we're learning that they're all kind of under this broad umbrella organization or kind of loose collective online that is called the Com. And the Com is actually really scary. So the Com's kind of organized in three different ways. So there's IRL Com, there's extortion Com, and then there's hacker Com. And when we're talking about ransomware and scattered spider, lapis, we're mainly looking at that hacker Com, but IRL com is like violence for hire, saying, hey, like if you want a hit guy, a hitman, I can be your person, and they're advertising these services. And then extortion com too, it's like they're going after what they perceive as vulnerable populations online. So like a lot of like young girls, young women, because they think that they're going to be most likely to get upset, most likely to end up paying this like ransom and extortion. And the way they recruit is that they also go on those gaming platforms, those gaming hubs, they try to find young men who will join them, and like they radicalize them using that like, hey, nothing really matters, let's the nihilistic extremism, like let's cause chaos, anarchy, downfall of society. If nothing matters, why not?
To give the listeners a bit of a flavor of just how scary and sort of weird this group is, because I feel like it's hard to understand. I mean, there was that very high profile arrest a few months ago of a 17-year-old boy. His name was Nikita Giuseppe, I believe. But, he was arrested because he murdered his parents in preparation to then try and assassinate the president of the United States for the downfall of society. So this, I mean, and I think we should be clear that probably not every single member of Scattered Spider or even this larger collective maybe has such high aspirations, but that is sort of the pinnacle of really what this online movement is moving towards. And it's just such a convergence between the digital and physical space in terms of physical and violent threats that it's a scary outlook.
Yeah, and even in that case, it wasn't like you'd think that, as we've seen in some of the like other assassination attempts or plots that have been revealed, that oh, it's ideologically motivated. It's like they have a specific agenda. This guy wanted to pit everybody against each other and bring about a civil war.
And I feel like we're so accustomed now to specifically like Russian ransomware groups or cyber criminal groups, and that's, one set of threats. But to your point about the effectiveness of this group's social engineering tactics, I mean, they're from Anglophone countries. I mean, probably they are very adept at knowing, a casual way to connect with employees, build that trust, and then be successful in tricking or duping employees. But, again, that just goes back to like how scary the thought is, and how we've have previously not thought as much about cyber crime threats, or just these online threats that are originating from the West and in these Anglophone countries. And to your point about this larger collective, it's fairly decentralized. Different members are on different channels, but as far as trying to really mitigate it, law enforcement is sort of at a loss. They've had, numerous arrests at this point of members of Scattered Spider, Lapsus, Shiny Hunters, but, it's just often challenging to actually break down the communication channels for these groups because they're using encrypted platforms and, to your point, reaching out to new members on sort of innocuous platforms like gaming centers.
Yeah. And so we've written about the COM and Scattered Spider and these ransomware groups a lot, but something that we don't really get to talk about, or it's just not as relevant for our specific coverage, is kind of just like the driver. It makes me think about like some of the psychological drivers of this kind of activity. So obviously, I mean, one, we're just more and more online these days, and so people are finding those communities through the gaming communities, those just different digital communities. That's how people are finding connection. We also have so many factors in our society that just lead to isolation. There's also in the like the incel group is another part of that too. It gets really, really deep down that rabbit hole when you look at all the different sects and all the different like types of members and their offshoots.
Yeah, and I mean, to just like branch out a little further to a topic that we've also discussed for a bit now is just the expansion of hacktivism. And I think, like 10 years ago, we were really just thinking of groups like Anonymous, but now hacktivism is really like anyone with a political or ideological agenda and a keyboard. And, again, like I think for our purposes, we have a bit of a nuance when we're talking about what are really state-sponsored groups masquerading as hacktivists. But to get to more to your point, like we're seeing more of these just like localized, angry, polarized people that are targeting different institutions in the United States, through digital means. I'm thinking, like reproductive centers, government agencies, police agencies. And so this is another just sort of scary aspect of the lowering, threshold for different individuals to get involved in threat activity because they're either nihilistic, financially motivated, angry, have a political agenda. It's a tough outlook.
I think hacktivism is really interesting though, and I think that for a lot of people, they see it as an opportunity to be able to like use these skills that they maybe necessarily they don't have like massive backgrounds in advocacy and like organizing and everything, but they see these lower level cyber tools that are available to them that are just kind of like something they know how to do because they grew up in this online digital environment, or they do actually just have technical skills because that's what they do with their time and their work maybe. But this is another opportunity for some individuals to be able to get involved and like take a stand against some of their political grievances, or to align with like their political beliefs. So I think a lot of people see it as kind of democratizing advocacy a little in a completely different way. So it's some of it is really, really interesting. And some of the different groups that you see. I know we've talked a lot about like Wakamaya going after and extractivist companies, and posing major, major risks to those types of companies and stealing a lot of their data, speaking out against them. But the environmentally motivated hacktivism is something that's super interesting, and you actually don't see as much specifically in the environmental realm, but it's something I'm wondering if, like, as we go on, we're going to see more and more of.
Yeah, well, for the sake of our listeners, Guacamaya is a hacktivist collective that is originating in Latin America and formed, it says, to protect the indigenous land. And so it's, conducted some of those cyber attacks. To your point, they're one of the only super environmentally motivated groups we know about right now, but it's interesting to think that in the next 5, 10, 15 years, what other major issues do we see groups of people sort of latch on to and try and express themselves in the digital space? I think sometimes I'm surprised that there frankly aren't more environmentally motivated groups, just given, the fact that climate change seems to be getting worse. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on what maybe the biggest issues will be for new hacktivist, ideologically motivated activity?
Yeah, so I think that specifically when we're talking about the environmentally motivated hacktivism, that I think part of the reason why we probably don't see as much of this is because companies don't, unless they do a massive website defacement or something that is public facing and outward, companies might not want to tell people that they've been targeted because this hacktivist group sent them a message or tried to take down their systems because they didn't like what they were doing. It doesn't look good from a reputational standpoint. So I'm wondering how much of that is kind of kept under wraps intentionally, to the extent that they can. I think that website defacement obviously is public and people might see it, but say it's only up for like a minute and that before it's caught and they do it and they're able to fix it, then maybe it's not worth they definitely don't want to tell anybody about it, but or they just have good defenses and they have been able to prevent that. But I am kind of wondering, so we've already kind of seen calls in terms of like what are some other issues that we might see. So I think that like if we're talking about environmental activism, maybe logistics companies like and e-commerce companies maybe would also be targeted, like Amazon or just shipping companies would be sought after. And then if we're looking at the political landscape in the United States, we've already seen a little bit of this, but there are already like hacktivists calling for any kind of incriminating data on law enforcement, on ICE agents. Stuff like that is definitely, we haven't seen any major breaches yet, but we've seen calls from major hacktivist groups or notorious hacktivist actors. So that's something that we've been tracking and looking for. And then we've seen some screen defacement, Donald Trump's face on random screens. I also Columbia University has suffered from data breaches and hacktivist attacks related to affirmative action or related to handling of the pro-Palestinian protests. So I think that anything with political ramifications in the United States right now is really low-hanging fruit for hacktivists.
I'm curious to see how, given that we're already having a lot of indications of societal pushback against AI in numerous sectors. I'm thinking, protesters in the writer, in journalism, in like media and entertainment. I mean, this is going to become something that gets worse, in my opinion, and there's going to be more friction between people and companies, people and their work, in my opinion, over this role that artificial intelligence is going to play. And in any major revolution, there's, groups of people that really try and resist it. I'm thinking back to the Industrial Revolution and the Luddites that, really tried to like sabotage the Industrial Revolution. What is the next stage of that going to be in this era? And especially because this is going to happen so much more rapidly, I'm really curious to wonder how people may try and fight back against this trend through what I guess would be hacktivism. Ultimately, all of this technology for artificial intelligence is going to be housed in digital spaces. So protest against it is naturally going to take the online form. I don't think we've seen anything to that effect yet, like motivated hackers trying to target large AI companies out of protest for their technology, but I think that that's highly plausible in the future, and I'm just curious to see if that will manifest. And this is my prediction, so we'll come back to this when it
I've
happens.
actually seen at least one case of this happening. If you remember last year, No Bulge against Disney, that involved some complaints about AI. So I think you're right on the nose with that. That's definitely an attractive avenue to go after.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time today, Haley. I hope some of our listeners enjoyed hearing about the current threat landscape. And if you want to check out more of our coverage, you can go to rainetwork.com.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Allie.